A single detour in the next 2 days could rewrite the future of something that came from outside our solar system. We're not talking about theory, fiction, or internet rumors. We're talking about the exact moment when 3I Atlas, an interstellar object not born here, reaches its perihelion, the closest point to the sun, where any change in speed or direction would cease to be hypothesis and become recorded history. Machiavelli said that acts that change the course of power never happen by chance, but at the instant when opportunity and necessity intersect. This is that instant. For months it crossed space silently, obeying predictions, without deviation, without noise. This is precisely what is intriguing. Great decisions give no warning that they are coming. Should we believe that an object that came from another star crossed the void for countless years, only to leave us as it entered? Or should we admit that we are facing a period in which rare events occur without a second chance of observation? This tension between normality and rupture is what makes this moment something more than a simple orbital data point. It is an examination of what we call control. Every civilization, every species, and every individual carries within them a logic of power. Advance, retreat, remain, or intervene. In space there is no neutrality either. An interstellar body does not enter a planetary system out of curiosity. It enters on a defined trajectory. The question is whether that trajectory ends here or changes now. A small push, almost invisible to our eyes, could set 3I Atlas on a new path, and that decision, if there is a decision, occurs when the object is closest to the most violent source of gravity, energy, and risk in the solar system. The sun is the stage where irreversible choices are revealed. Some people are already claiming on social media that the object veered toward Earth, that it activated its engines, that it demonstrated intent. None of this has been confirmed. The records show an intact trajectory, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when the moment that could generate change has not yet occurred. The calm before the curve is what unsettles. Nature doesn't respect our anxiety. If something is going to happen, it will happen now, at the point on the sun where gravity amplifies intentions. This is the cosmos clock, not ours. Perhaps the right question isn't whether 3I Atlas will change course, but what it means for us to observe something with strategic potential at the exact moment that potential can be used. Machiavelli said that those who understand the timing, the right time to act, to remain silent or to attack, rule over those who merely watch. We are watching. Before moving on to the next part, which will address why, under a technological hypothesis, this object wouldn't choose Earth as its destination, I need to ask one essential thing. If you want to follow this real event as it happens without missing any further developments, subscribe to the channel now and like this video. The algorithm only delivers content like this to those who demonstrate genuine interest. The next information window may not be repeated. When discussing the technological hypothesis behind 3I Atlas, many people always make the same mistake. They project human behavior onto it. They believe that any advanced intelligence would come straight to Earth because there's water, a magnetic field, infrastructure, and billions of intelligent beings. This reasoning is intuitive, but it's exactly the kind of logic Machiavelli would call a naive view of power, believing that the main target is always the first step. A force arriving from outside doesn't expose itself at the center of the risk. It begins at the edges, where it can grow without resistance. Consider any human dynamic. Someone trying to overthrow a government doesn't invade the capital on the first day. infiltrating influence in the provinces. Someone seeking to dominate a company doesn't confront the CEO in the first week, gaining access to smaller sectors. Those seeking to conquer territory begin where there won't be an immediate reaction. A technological object observing Earth would see a problem, not an opportunity. The planet is teeming with life, full of sensors, full of weapons, full of paranoia. Any landing here would trigger fear, chaos, and conflict. It would be like touching a wasp's nest with your bare hand. This logic is repeated in simple, everyday examples. A seasoned thief doesn't break in through the front door while everyone is awake. He waits until the house is asleep. Someone seeking to manipulate another doesn't begin by confessing their intentions. They plant doubts, disarm resistance, and build a platform. In any ecosystem of power, the first move is never a frontal one. So applying the same logic to Earth isn't fiction. It's strategic coherence. A civilization that crossed interstellar distances would be aware of human behavior and would anticipate a hostile reaction. Hence the central point. If 3I Atlas were a technological vector, coming to Earth would be the worst possible move. There's global surveillance, militarized airspace, early warning systems, mass hysteria, politics, religion, and the media. It would be like a surgeon trying to operate on a body in convulsions. No benefit is derived from an environment that reacts before understanding. The rational alternative is always the same as Machiavelli described. First, choose the terrain where reaction is impossible. Mars wouldn't generate hysteria, but it's already been ignored in the flyby. Earth would be noise and risk. What remains are the strategic points where resources abound and resistance is zero. This leads natural reasoning to regions like Jupiter, which we'll discuss in the next section. But before we move on to this development, a warning. These reflections need to be discussed. Most people only look at the surface. They would come to Earth because there's life here, without understanding that advanced presence doesn't seek company. It seeks advantage. If you want to follow this analysis based on logic rather than hysteria, subscribe to the channel now. Like it. Share this video with anyone who still thinks in a simplified way. And comment below what you think would be the first step of strategic intelligence when entering our system. This helps the algorithm deliver this content to more people and ensures you don't miss the next step in this investigation. The next part will delve deeper into the second most coherent hypothesis, not landing on the inhabited planet, but establishing dominance where no one can prevent it. Jupiter isn't just a giant planet at the end of the sky. It's the most strategic piece of the entire solar system's architecture. Dozens of moons orbit it, some with internal oceans, others with thick ice capable of providing fuel, and others located in regions of intense radiation that act as natural walls. For an intelligence that doesn't seek confrontation, but seeks position, Jupiter isn't a random destination. It's the silent center of power. Ganymede, for example, is larger than Mercury and possesses something extremely rare, its own magnetic field. This offers partial protection from radiation, as well as a metallic core that suggests deep geological activity. Between the ice and the core lies a gigantic ocean containing more water than exists on Earth. Water provides fuel, shielding, life, and industrial infrastructure. Why risk landing on Earth when you can refuel and build without interference halfway? Europa and Callisto add another layer of strategic significance. Both also have internal oceans, but with different conditions. Europa has greater internal heating from gravitational tides, possibly hydrothermal vents, the kind of continuous energy source a colony would need. Callisto, on the other hand, receives less radiation and would be a long-term safe haven. 3 bases on 3 different moons would create a sovereign network before any civilization within the system could react. This logic raises an uncomfortable question. Advanced colonization happens first where no one is looking. On Earth, every move would be discussed, recorded, filmed, debated, and opposed. On Jupiter, none of this would happen. There are no eyes, no public opinion, no resistance. Why would a sophisticated intelligence make its debut on the only planet where the reaction would be immediate and unpredictable? Another rarely discussed point is the implicit military value of occupying the Jovian system. From there, it's possible to leap into the asteroid belt, stock up on water, mine rare earths, and then return to the shelter of the moons. From there, it's also easy to project power outward, toward Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And with enough time and fuel, it's possible to then return inward to Mars, Earth, and Venus. This is the kind of gradual power building Machiavelli described, establishing dominance through points that control logistics before controlling population centers. The real conflict in this discussion isn't astronomical, it's psychological. There's a natural resistance to admitting that the logical step toward intelligence might not include humanity. But power isn't driven by emotional vanity. It's driven by advantage. Earth would be glamour, glory, contact, headlines. Jupiter would be silence, resourcefulness, and lasting supremacy. Which would a strategist choose? This reflection puts Earth in an uncomfortable position. Perhaps we are not the primary objective of anything truly advanced. Perhaps we are merely observers of a pre-existing stage of something greater, a phase that occurs beyond our influence and without our intervention. What is the role of a civilization that is a spectator of its own shift in relevance? Before moving on to the next part, which will explore the plausible origin and trajectory of 3I Atlas within a logic of intention, leave your thoughts on this hypothesis in the comments. Does it make sense to you that a technological civilization would avoid Earth and prioritize Jupiter? I'd like to know how far you follow this line of reasoning. Subscribe, like, share the video, and keep this content alive. The next step of the analysis will delve deeper into where such an operation could have originated and why time is no obstacle for those who act strategically rather than in haste. The most coherent origin hypothesis for an object like 3I Atlas isn't in exotic systems thousands of light years away, but in its nearby neighborhood, Barnard's star. It's the second closest star to the Sun, just 5.96 light years away, and is moving at high speed toward our system. It's an ancient red dwarf, estimated to be between 7 and 12 billion years old. Much older than the Sun, this means enough time for a civilization to be born, mature, decay, be reborn, or depart. There are confirmed planets in orbit, including Barnard B, a super-Earth world with a mass about 3.2 times greater than Earth. Probabilistically, any civilization there would have had millions of years more than humanity to develop space engineering. There's another little mentioned point. The first detection of 3I Atlas showed a speed close to 60 kilometers per second. Maintaining that speed, the journey from Barnard's star to here would take a little over 30,000 years. In human times, this is incomprehensible, but in civilizational times, it's compatible with interstellar projects. The Great Pyramid of Egypt was built 4,500 years ago and still exists. Rome dominated the Mediterranean for almost 1,000 years. Civilizational lineages last centuries, kingdoms last generations, but strategic survival projects can span eons. An interstellar vehicle leaving an old star for a young star doesn't contradict any physical laws. It simply challenges our notion of scale. A rarely discussed fact is the angular trajectory. When we project the positions of Barnard's star and the entrance of 3I Atlas onto the celestial plane, the difference is not absurd. It doesn't prove anything, but it makes it plausible. An object that left that direction and now crosses our system in a line close to the ecliptic plane doesn't seem like a chaotic trajectory. It seems like a movement with a destiny programmed long before we came into existence. Troublesome questions arise when we add the deceleration factor. If an object were traveling at high speed and wanted to operate within an orbitally stable system, it would need to slow down before entering the inner zone. We have no way of knowing whether 3I Atlas traveled faster in earlier segments and slowed down before being detected. This possibility would create a huge information gap between what we see and what actually happened before detection. How many civilizations would make the mistake of entering an inhabited system at uncontrolled speed? The rational approach would be to slow down first, observe later, and intervene last. Another curious element is the historical direction of Barnard's star. Studies indicate that approximately 10,000 to 14,000 years ago, it was even closer to the Sun. This time period coincides with profound human revolutions, the end of the last glaciation, the beginning of agriculture, and the emergence of the first cities. There is no direct proven relationship between human and astrophysical events, but the temporal coincidence appeals to the strategic mind. Periods of planetary instability are good times for silent, long-range movements. In the field of planetary biology and risk engineering, it makes sense for an interstellar project to be launched when a target system is young and habitable, but before the native civilization has the capacity to defend itself. Earth today has rockets, radars, military alliances, and global surveillance networks. 10,000 years ago, it didn't. A visitor who passed nearby during that period could have mapped, cataloged, or simply marked the system for future return. The return would be made when energetic conditions were favorable, such as a perfect solar approach. For a redirection maneuver, there's a recurring pattern when analyzing power structure, whether human or cosmic. The most logical path is the one that can be sustained over time with minimal opposition. The existence of a civilization that plans on a millennial scale doesn't require miraculous technology, just strategic patience. The next part will follow precisely this line. If the origin is plausible and time is sufficient, what would be the next logical move after the sun's approach, and what would that mean for us who observe too late a game that may already be underway? The logic of using Jupiter as a point of dominance is not a work of fiction. It is a practical interpretation of power dynamics on a cosmological scale. Whoever controls Jupiter controls routes, fuel, mineral resources, and strategic position. A colony established there, even a small one, could operate as an axis of expansion without being provoked or detected by internal civilization. From Jupiter, it is possible to reach the asteroid belt with minimal energy and return carrying rare earth metals without encountering resistance. It is possible to launch missions to Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune at the right time of conjunctions. It is also possible, at a later stage, to march inward Mars, the Moon, Earth with an already consolidated industrial base. This is the difference between presence and supremacy. On the solar system's chessboard, Earth is a noisy target, Jupiter a silent throne. Whoever establishes themselves there doesn't need to defeat anyone, Just get there first. Machiavelli described this type of strategy in the human realm. Real victory is not one achieved through direct confrontation, but one that makes confrontation unnecessary. The most solid power is the one that establishes itself before anyone can challenge it. This is precisely the condition available in the Jovian system. No country, no company, and no terrestrial agency has the logistical or energetic capacity to prevent, monitor, or dislodge anything established there. From the moment a presence occupies Ganymede, Callisto, or Europa with minimal infrastructure, the game is over not by force, but by asymmetry. The military value of this positioning is even greater than its economic one. Jupiter maintains 2 enormous swarms of Trojan asteroids, gravitationally locked 60 degrees ahead and behind its orbit. This characteristic creates pockets of raw materials that do not disperse. A group based on Ganymede could launch probes into these regions, extract material, and always return to the same gravitational well without the need for long orbital delays. In practice, it would be a refinery, a factory operating with a nearly infinite supply. Another often overlooked aspect is the psychological effect. Earth would never know. Even if someone managed to photograph an artificial installation on Ganymede, public discussion would be swallowed up by discredit. Institutional noise, contradictory theories, and military information blockade. The possibility of an effective response is zero. This kind of advantage is the highest form of dominance. Power without visibility, presence without confrontation, control without war. There's also a long-term advantage. Jupiter is located halfway between the Sun and the outer edge of the system. This makes the planet a double platform, allowing for both inward and outward expansion. Strategically, it's an anchor. An empire born on the edge has difficulty retreating. One born in the center has difficulty expanding. A base on Jupiter isn't the beginning of a plan, it's half of it. This scenario raises an uncomfortable question. Earth is debating the hypothesis, while the actual movement, if it exists, would already be past the decisive stage. Most civilizations lose not because they are defeated, but because they react after the right time. The clock of power is not marked by alarms, it is marked by initiative. By the time the opponent realizes the game has begun, the game is already decided. The next part will be the most delicate of this analysis. What would change in the human condition if, in the coming days, 3I Atlas's trajectory proves an intention consistent with strategic colonization? Not in the realm of fear, but in the realm of hierarchy. What does it mean to exist in a universe where the decision has already been made by someone capable of moving sooner, further, and with more patience than we do? The interval between perihelion and the resumption of visibility of 3I Atlas after leaving the sun's glare represents a kind of cosmic suspension. It's unclear whether anything will change, but it's clear that this is the moment when invisible decisions may be being made beyond the reach of human eyes. This kind of window, short, silent, and irreversible, is not exclusive to space. In human life, the greatest shifts in destiny also occur when no one is looking. A choice of study, a withdrawal and avoided conversation, a change of focus, a break from a habit, a dissatisfaction that is transformed into direction. Machiavelli observed that men are not for lack of strength, but for lack of timing. They react late, observe too much, act when there is no longer any effect. Now we have a living study of this, a real event in heaven, where action, if any, happens before we know it. This creates a mirror for the viewer. How many areas of your life are waiting for evidence before moving? How many decisions do you intend to make only after it becomes clear? Every strategic dispute is won by those who decide before the evidence, not after it. Turning this perception into practice requires a method. The first step is to choose an area of life where there is awareness but no movement. Finances, body, study, faith, business, relationships, mental discipline. The second is to break the illusion that change arises from volume, change arises from direction. A single, consistent, daily action creates a new trajectory vector with the same principle as an orbital maneuver. A small force applied at the right moment produces a gigantic effect in the future. The third step is to make this action irrefutable, not optional. If it's writing, write 5 lines a day, even if you don't feel like it. If it's your body, 10 minutes a day, even if you don't have the energy. If it's finances, write 1 entry a day, even if you don't have the motivation. Repetition destroys the resistance that reflection alone never destroys. There's also an important psychological component, abandoning the expectation of approval. No power warns before acting because it seeks efficiency, not applause. On an individual level, the same rule applies. The beginning shouldn't be public. It should be shielded. What begins exposed begins vulnerable. Governing oneself means acting before the world reacts. This video isn't just about astronomy. It's about existential hierarchy. Seeing 3I Atlas at perihelion forces us to face the reality that long-term decisions are made by those who think in scale. This should serve as a provocation for a simple, hard question. What action do you need to start now, even without a guaranteed outcome, so that your future isn't decided by inertia? Before closing, I want to invite you to turn this content into real action. Write in the comments, even anonymously, if you prefer what area of your life you will apply this. Small, daily strategic action. Logic 2. Share your experience or question. Subscribe to the channel now to continue following this line of reasoning in depth. Leave a like so the content reaches more people. And activate the habit of participating. Videos like this only make sense when they generate movement, not just reflection. History may be changing in the sky. Yours can change today at your table.